Hey everybody, and welcome back to Kerbal Space Program RP-0. This is our Twitch recap episode from last Sunday's live stream, where we are taking a break from Big Perseus development because we need to quickly throw together a replacement station for our now twice failed Venus Orbital Laboratory project. The first failure was a rapid unplanned disassembly at launch, and the second was a failure to capture into Venus orbit, and I think the design may have had something to do with both failures. So we're actually just going to be revisiting a design from the ground up. Now, you may recognize this habitat portion. This is the identical portion that we just sent out to Harmonia Station to replace its now retired core segment with a lab just tacked on the top of it. This is Sans docking port for increased stability, and since we're sending it all out on one big launch, we don't really need the modular ability there. So we have made a few changes, but we are afforded the nice luxury that I built a backup for this that we can scrap and get a lot of our build time back to us, so we can get relatively quick turnaround on this project, which does make things quite nice. We will be keeping the capture stage because we wanted to avoid an Aero capture at pretty much any cost, just in case. The tonnage will be kind of high when we get there, and there's a very thin line at Venus between capture and deorbit and overheat and explode. The major change that we're going to make here between Harmonia Station, its sister outpost, and Venus Station is going to be a built-on science equipment. We kind of foregoed most of that with Harmonia Station because a lot of the science had already been collected. But not so much the case here with Venus. We have yet to have a crewed expedition out there, and the focus on getting science at Venus has been not nearly as great as it has been with Mars. So we will be including a full complement of sciencey bits. We do also want to give it an independent means to generate power. We are closer to the sun than Mars, so we probably don't need these two gigantic tweak-scaled panels. They are the exact same ones that we sent out to Harmonia Station. But, if they're going to work for Mars, they'll work like 4 times over at Venus, which is an absolute benefit to us for whatever reason. We can leave the scrubbers on the entire time, which is beneficial to someone somewhere, I'm sure. I also did not forget to include independent comms this time. We have both direct communication with Earth and shortwave communication for other things in orbit, which will hopefully expand our broader network of things that we can have comms with, which really will help us for future surface operations and other future missions. Now, for the science loadout, we're going to go ahead and give this a full complement as best we could, including our standard 6. Not really worried about balance, considering the total mass of the station will likely be more than enough to offset a weight difference from the scientific equipment placed asymmetrically around basically the top or the bottom. However, which way you want to look at it, I would kind of consider it the bottom, because if it's the top, then it's just a T-pose station. Anyway, it's our magnetometer. We will be shuffling some of these things around. I just kind of wanted to get a loose idea of all the neat things that we are going to be working with this time through. There's a lot of science that is dedicated for the surface only, and I do actually want to include this soil moisture sensor thing, but it needs a node to be placed on, so we're going to have to give it a strut or a octagonal piece as a base. Now, I did also want to include this bit of science, or station science, that just looks awkward there, so we're actually going to move it to the other side, like so, where it's still awkward, just not as awkward, I guess. Only kinda. So we'll get the lab placed back onto the correct node that looks way less awkward than where we had it resting before, and then start to revisit our science instrument placement. First, we'll figure out orientation for this thing. It's not going to go there because that will likely interfere with things docking to that lower docking port. I've decided now that that is the bottom of the station, despite where avionics control is oriented. So we'll just push a few things off to the side here opposite our film canister and get this thing mounted, and then just recess it a little bit before retracting the experiment into its stowed position for what we hope will be a very smooth launch to some degree. Anyway, and just a quick look around, I think our balance is going to be okay, but do need some thrusters to help maneuver this thing into position, and hopefully to aid with docking for things that are considerably heavier than the station itself, namely an Artemis or Perseus craft or a big Perseus. And also the fuel resupplies are nearly 100 tons apiece coming in with food, water, oxygen, etc. You'll notice this has no independent food, water, oxygen tank of its own. It is completely reliant on the fuel supply pods staying docked until their resources are used up, and then they will be jettisoned. Now, we are also going to include 2 of the remote guidance units here. This will allow the station to act as a control center or a ground station for remote controlling other things in orbit and other experiments on the surface with significantly less signal delay than if those commands were relayed from Earth. The caveat here is that we need to have 6 Kerbals on board for these things to work, and that is what this station is designed to hold. It's supposed to support a crew of 6 for mission durations of up to 2 years, maybe even longer, depending on how well we like them, or how often we can get resupplied pods in situ. Anyway, we do have a pretty big discrepancy with our thruster imbalance. I just want to check for basic balance using an engine placed on the bottom to see what kind of torque we're looking at for keeping this thing off center, and a quick discussion on what parts were being used to construct the habitat ring of the station itself, because it has no crewed command pod, which I wonder if that's going to create a signal delay. Never mind, because crew on board, it's its own ground station. So it should be just fine. Anyway, we're going to make some adjustments to these thruster ports. All 4 of these had to be placed independently. If you remember the episode where we developed this habitat ring for Harmonia Station, because we couldn't copy things around for the way that the hub at the center is built. So we're just going to get rid of them. There. A little bit better, and we're going to try to place thruster ports on things where symmetry can be a thing. And, the habitat ring and the experiment core thing down there at the bottom will house most of our thrusters. I think later on we're actually going to invert those so that they're firing down. That way they can help provide ullage or translational control fore and aft for the station should it need to be a thing. And we'll also have a conversation about roll control. I think these thrusters don't make the cut. At least they really shouldn't. Once we invert the other ones, they are entirely unnecessary also. But these probably a little more worthwhile considering the balance and whatnot. Anyway, there was quite a conversation on roll control and a lot of thruster placement revolving around that fact also. We ended up going with a much simpler solution, but the very first thing that absolutely needed to get done was action grouping the science, because I do not want to go through and right-click on all of these experiments, provided I may actually miss 1 or 2, and that would be not a good thing, especially with all of the available science that we have left to collect yet at Venus over pretty much most of its biomes. We'd like to hit as much as we can. We don't have Science Alert or Science Here Now installed, so it's basically me monitoring the little Mech Jeb window that I have set up in the bottom right-hand corner of the flight screen that tells me what biome I'm in, and paying attention to when that biome changes, which, not a perfect system, but a great way to eliminate mods and keep longevity of the playthrough going, so I don't get burned out or try to min-max all the sciencey stuff. It just keeps it fun, really. So another quick check of our thruster port controls now that we've got the big thrusters switched around, and they can do both yaw and pitch translation, and also fore and aft. This was my initial solution for roll control, but like I said before, these things cannot just be you can't just turn on symmetry to get all these thrusters. They'd have to be placed basically individually across all 4, and It was debated if this was going to work because them being off even a little bit was going to really mess up roll control. And it's considering you don't really need to be near the center of mass for accurate roll control, maybe we could just move them up top to the solar panel arms where we have lots of accessible room and plenty of good placement, and can pull them further away from the actual absolute center line where they'll give us more torque for spinning said station. I felt like it was probably a worthwhile idea to do that, considering we're seeing some pretty interesting torque numbers on the roll axis. Just to verify that our thrusters are in fact correct, and we will limit these thrusters out here on the arms to only roll control, just to make sure that they are only actuate. We don't want them operating on any other axis because that's just going to be weird. I mean, they probably could do, what axis would that be? Yaw. Yeah, I guess it would be yaw because of the orientation of the station in relation to the crawler way. I'm never entirely sure on that. And just a quick check, moving our heaviest experiment around to see if that affects our torque figures, and it does not by even a little bit. And one last run through to see if there was any of these sciencey experiments I missed. It turns out the answer is yes. The visual observations pod and the radio plasma wave signal, the radio signal plasma wave detector, RPWS. There, that's what it is. We'll throw that on here in a little bit once I am reminded of it by chat. Thank you, chat. So kudos to them for not letting me forget an experiment that's totally worthwhile. Now, while that technically works, it just looks weird. So we're not going to put it there. We'll interfere with the docking port. We're going to switch it to this side here and just assume that that's not going to hit the docking port, or that anything docking with it will have more than enough clearance to get around those antennas. They could also just be, retracted. That might be the easiest option. So just a quick double check of fuel, making sure that these thrusters can be fed and that the appropriate tanks are pressurized. We will run this in a orbital simulation just as a quick systems check to make sure everything checks out. So I'm going to turn you over to old me live during the broadcast. Look at that. Boot. That's not bad. RCS to arm. Okay, RCS to arm, SAS on. Okay. Solid response from all thrusters. Yes. Perfect. Let's try radio in. Oh. Should probably correct that magnetometer. I mean, I don't know, maybe the angle it's at is actually good because it doesn't knock into our antenna. That's not bad. And it looks like we got plenty of clearance for docking on all 4 of our CLS compliant docking ports. Temperature scan from space just above Earth's shores. We don't have that? Well, someone's been slacking. Or Geiger counter. Man, there's like 12 science on the table from easy stuff that we just didn't do. And grasslands, too. Huh. Well, alright then. Wish they made an A line of the big cameras. 6D2A. There's no science alert. More than indeed. That's fair. And it actually pivots pretty well. I'll say the fun starts when you void the warranty. Just ask the crew of any Nemo or Shrook in flight. Jolage. Alright. How are we going to hold straight? Yes. We have oscillating pitch input. It's to be expected. But I think more or less this will be able to burn without rotating itself to stupidity like before. Well, maybe, but we are going to go through some fuel doing it. And we're certainly going to void the warranty on that engine. Man, so someone would need a specific DSLR just for shooting in the infrared. It is, but it's a simulation. So, it's getting simulated bad readings. Oh, that's an interesting response on roll. Utopia Selective. Thanks for the follow. Yeah. This is just roll input, which is more than awesome. So I guess spin stabilize, not a thing, but I wonder if it's those bottom thrusters that are screwing with it. Or maybe our hyperactive... Oh, and we ended up facing the wrong way again. Who cares? IR pass filter. Compensate by adding a lot of exposure time. Well, alright, so generally speaking, thrusters are pretty responsive. Let's see what happens if we tell it to just hold prograde. How well it can do that. Maybe we just tell those thrusters not to use roll control. Alright, Wook, I hope everything comes out okay. Yeah, all three control axes are leveled out, and we're heading straight to prograde. Even under physics warp, seems to behave itself. Can't tell if that's like camera shake from the engine or if it's what it's doing, but it has not shaken itself apart. I'm ready to call this one successful. And back now into the VAB. We will remove the VAB very quickly and get a crew of 6 on board and start metering out our life support. 61 days with a full complement of 6 with absolutely no support structure attached, which I think should be within reason. Honestly, if we ever have a point where our supply pod is empty, they always have the option of packing up and retreating to whatever vessel they came in. That always takes priority on being resupplied, so should carry a solid year for all of them, which hopefully would carry them at least to the next transfer window. That's the plan anyway. So the next test is to get this attached to a DN6 launcher that will be carrying it to orbit and then onto Venus, and making sure that the one we have saved in our subassemblies menu has all the right equipment. It does not. We had to upgrade our HG3. I did double check before starting the live stream that those are 172 booster engines, but we need to do a wiggle test because that's how we lost our first Venus station, was a structural failure during launch, resulting in rapid unplanned disassembly. We'd like to avoid that this time, so as a test for structural rigidity, we'll do a launch test. So here's old me. Alright. I guess I could click this do not show at start thing, but then how would I know that it loaded? Oh, where's my fairing sep? I should probably verify that's in the correct place. It is not, as per usual. Alright. That is a mighty fairing. SAS is on, throttle is set to full, rocket is bouncing. Welcome back, Wook. Lamps off. There's a bit of a shimmy. We're just doing a quick check. 5 rubles. We just want to make sure this isn't gonna boogie noodle its way to orbit. So a very quick half-spun launch check. And 4152 in our HC3 upper stage, which is more than enough to transfer to Venus and have a little bit of a oomph left in it to start that capture maneuver. And hopefully 3125 will be enough to finish it off. Boogie Oogie Oogie, you just can't Boogie Oogie no more. This is the same station. We just slapped a DN6 under it. Yes, this is the same thing we were just building. Yes, yes. I just, you know, if it's gonna boogie noodle its way to orbit, I need to know now instead of being caught off guard by it boogie noodling on its way to orbit when I go to actually launch. So, we'll get into boogie noodle cam. Yeah, boogie noodle. Not as bad as I thought it would be, and maybe controllable. So at least it's only boogie noodling in one axis. Although we're probably going to have to correct left and right to get on the correct plane, so let's... There's some serious wiggles. Yeah, buddy. Pineapple. Alright, X, never forget. Yep. Lifting body version of Gemini. I don't know, the only difference between a really bad idea and a really good one is the success rate. It's normal for the noodle to boogie. Dynamic load simulator for Saturn V, right? Fair enough. You're launching at 300 plus parts, launch pad ish. Can't wait for the super high frames per second. Alright, well, I'm just beating on the yaw control, and we haven't shaken ourselves apart yet. We're well past max Q. A simple spaceplane. Joni's essentially a cockpit. What? Yes. True enough. So I really want to see how bad the boogie is when we shed the fairings, because it's really hard to tell where the boogie originates. So I'm thinking it has to be inside the fairing. Boogie originates at the boosters. Do you think maybe we'll see less boogie oogie after booster set? Certainly does look that way. Oh, now we got some serious boogie. This is the I'm not touching anything wiggles. Okay, yeah, it looks like if I control against it, it stops. Wow. It should be controlled from station avionics on the upper stage. Which, yeah, maybe if we had a core lower down, we would see less boogie. No, where is my other core? There it is. Control from here. Let's see if this solves a little bit of boogie. Not particularly well. We are pulling about 5 Gs. Boogie intensifies. Coming up on booster step, so I guess we'll have our answer here very soon. about 10 seconds of real world time because, you know, yellow clock. Booster set. Clearing away. Yeah, hey, would you look at that? No more boogie. Been missing the intro jokes. Oh, I'm so sorry, Wook. I'll be real honest, I just flat out ran out of stuff to say. At one point I started writing them down, making a list of all the ones that I'd done before and ones I didn't feel bad about recycling. But it came to be that after spending like an hour or two editing together an episode, I'd be like, okay, now I just need the intro joke and I'm ready to go. And I'd sit there for like 2 hours and not think of anything that was worth anything at all. Bearing setup, that's what we forgot to do. And double check for a second boogie. And so at some point it became a thing of get the episode out or push it back because I have to go to bed. But I do one day intend on bringing them back. I just need to let them rest for a while and then recycle all the ones that I've written down. The radial decouplers should just be at their regular scale, 100%, yeah. I did not bump them up. I don't think I did. Wow, it's been so long. How short and stubby the DN6 is? I think that's the only time anyone's called him short and stubby. So maybe if we strut the boosters. Yeah, Wookie just suggested that. Maybe that's exactly what we'll do. And the thing is that we launched the DN6 a lot, and we very rarely get the boogie noodle. But I don't know. Chat, why don't you guys go ahead and weigh in? Intro joke, yay or nay? Pointless or more often than not stupid? Or worth being stupid? I don't know. Do you miss them, yes or no? Oh. And this turned into a pretty good ascent. And I didn't pay attention to any of it, and I actively tried to make the thing blow up. And yet here we are, walking a pretty good line to apogee. And dogs are barking to let me know that everything is going well. Strut the Shuriken booster, the EFT, and Orbiter, minimize the wiggles. And it does in fact look the part. Commander Cloud votes yay, or is just cheering our fantastic simulated ascent that I will never be able to replicate in real life ever again. Much appreciated. Oh yeah, and we're totally getting to orbit on our core stage here. 1,300 meters per second remaining, current speed 7.5 kilometers per second. And we're starting to walk out our distance to apogee, so just go ahead and angle down. Oh yeah, look at that wiggle. It's all in the lab. Wiggle, wiggle. Alright, is it the connection? No, it looks like it's literally just the lab on top of the habitat that's doing all the wiggling. And it's even strutted to stuff. That's unfair. Alright, let's shut it down. So much wasted Delta V. So much cargo capacity. The lab strutted to the fairing base. It is not. The lab is strutted to the habitat, which is strutted to the transfer to the capture stage, which is strutted to that thing. So I don't know if we can actually get a strut from the laboratory down to the fairing base. We can, however, probably run struts from the habitat to the fairing base. Yeah, KJR never actually did its job. Alright, we're done with this simulation. Revert to VAB. And so back now in the VAB, we're just going to make a couple of very small changes, namely to strut placement. We're going to get a few more going from our docking ring on down to the fairing. And again, these need to be placed on individually because symmetry with the station hub stuff is just not really a thing. So we'll also adjust our struts from the laboratory to the habitat ring itself and hope that that gives us a little bit more stability. Then we found these mystery struts in here, which were likely left over from the old design. They will take some interesting camera work to get pulled off, but I think all in all, the rigidity thing was can be mostly solved, and even if it's not, it's pretty tolerable. And I think we can successfully get this thing to orbit and get it on its way to Venus, which we will be doing at our next Venus window. So we have added this to the build list. We might build 2 of them just in case. Only 418 grand a pop, so I think it's well worth it considering our 2 previous failures cost around that much, but not that it matters. We have to keep trying. Anyway, that's going to do it for this episode, everyone. Thank you so much for hanging out. I really do appreciate it, and I will see all of you in the next one. So until then, see you later.